स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. Namaskar to all of you. Welcome to the study of Great Master Sri Ramakrishna. Now we will start with the new chapter. The name of the chapter is A Few Words on Bhava, different moods, the spiritual moods, the divine moods. Then a few words on Bhava, Samadhi and Darshana. Samadhi is the highest concentration of mind, merging in Atman or the Lord, Parabrahmavastu. Then Darshanam is vision. So Shardanandaji Maharaj will be dealing on Bhava, Samadhi and Darshana. The spiritual modes, profound meditations and spiritual visions. That's the chapter, new chapter. We are now going to discuss on that. Now, Shardanandaji Maharaj starts with a beautiful verse from Bhagavad Gita. The verse is the 64th verse of the 18th chapter. 18th chapter, 64th verse, almost fag end of the Bhagavad Gita. There, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna through that to all of us. Listen again to my supreme word, the profoundest. You are dear to me. Therefore, I will tell you what is good for you. He's telling all of us, Lord Krishna, listen again to my supreme word, the profoundest. You are dear to me. Therefore, I will tell you what is good for you. Now, the shloka, I'll just repeat the shloka. I've given you the simple meaning. What is that verse? Sarva guhyatamam bhuyaha shruno me paramam vachaha ishtosi me dhridamiti tato vakshyami te hitam. Sarva guhyatamam bhuyaha shruno me paramam vachaha ishtosi me dhridamiti tato vakshyami te hitam. So listen again to me, listen again to my supreme word, the profoundest. You are dear to me. Therefore, I will tell you what is good for you. In this verse, Lord Krishna is telling, here again my supreme word, the most secret of all, you are dearest to me. So I will speak what is good for you. In the 63rd verse, Lord Krishna completes the sermon of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna leaves Arjuna to choose to act as he pleases. He gives the freedom. The Lord gives us all the freedom. Yet here Krishna offers to repeat the supreme knowledge with a personal advice to all of us, a gesture confirming to Vedic tradition. At the end of Guru's sermon in the Upanishads, the disciple lingers for more knowledge. The disciple asks for further lessons, particular instructions for him. The Guru thus gives him specific advice to the yearning disciple. Confirming to this tradition, Krishna wraps up his sermon with a personal note of advice to Arjuna. Arjuna has presumably gestured to the Lord for such advice through his eagerness to learn. In an expression of fondness for Arjuna, Krishna gives him his final guideline for attaining spiritual enlightenment. So that is the 64th verse of the 18th chapter. Almost Krishna, while winding up the whole Bhagavad Gita teaching, he's giving this wonderful verse. Listen again to my supreme word, the profoundest. You are dear to me. He's telling all of us, you are dear to me. Therefore, I will tell you what is good for you. So now, Shardanandaji starts with the discussion. It will not be an exaggeration to say that before Sri Ramakrishna became well known, the people of Calcutta, both the educated and the uneducated, were completely ignorant about bhava. It's no way given in this particular way. What is the real purport of this bhava? So as we told, after the advent of Sri Ramakrishna as the Avatara, he has not only given us so much confirmation about all the scriptures, about the veracity of all the scriptures, but together he has also shown us something new, so many things which have gone beyond all the scriptures. So now Sri Ramakrishna has given so many things about this bhava. Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling, it will not be exaggeration to say that before Sri Ramakrishna became well known, the people of Calcutta, both the educated and the educated, We're completely ignorant about what is bhava, different moods, samadhi, or the extraordinary visions and experiences of the spiritual realm. The uneducated masses had a fantastic conception about these, sprung from fear and sense of mystery, while the modern educated community, drifting on the currents of foreign ideologies introduced by a system of education that was devoid of the indigenous religious background, looked upon this kind of vision, ecstasy, etc., as impossible or as derangement of the brain. The bodily changes due to ecstasy belonging to the domain of spirituality appears to their eyes to be a fainting fit or a peculiar disease. Although conditions have changed to a great extent, very few people are even now really able to understand the inner meaning of bhava and samadhi. Again, it is necessary to have a fair knowledge of the nature of samadhi in order to understand, even to a very small extent, the state of bhava mukha in which Sri Ramakrishna was always dwelling. Hence, we shall now try to explain a little of these to the reader. What the people in general do not experience is called by us as abnormal state. So generally, the present day psychology decides whatever people in general do not experience is called by us as an abnormal state. But the subtle experiences of the spiritual world can never be the objects of knowledge for the ordinary human mind. So this is not abnormal, but supernormal, supranormal. Such experiences require instructions, training, constant practice, etc. The extraordinary visions and experiences fill the spiritual aspirant with purity and gradually make him fit for realizing eternal peace by filling him every day with new vigor and ideas. Is it then reasonable to call these visions, experiences, etc. as abnormal? Everyone has to admit that the fact that all abnormalities without exception make men weak and bring about a deterioration in their intellectual and other powers. Note it. If it is abnormal, if it is a disease of the mind, what is going to happen? Shardananda Ji Maharaj is asking us, is it then reasonable to call these visions, experiences, etc. abnormal? Everyone has to admit the fact that all abnormalities without exception makes men weak. So if it is an abnormal experience, it's a disease, then it will make that person weak. Everyone has to admit it. It is logical. The fact that all abnormalities without exception makes men weak and bring about a deterioration in their intellectual and other powers. As the effect of the visions and experiences of the spiritual world is quite the opposite of deterioration. It must be admitted that the cause of all these is also opposite. And therefore, these cannot be called as diseases or derangements of the brain. As the effects of the vision, as the effect of the weakness of our mind or diseases is abnormality and weakness, it will bring about deterioration in our condition. But the effect of visions, bhava, and experiences of the spiritual world is quite the opposite of deterioration. It must be admitted that the cause of all these is also opposite. And therefore, these cannot be called as diseases or derangements of the brain. You go to the medical world or the psychological world, whatever they cannot find out, whatever they cannot diagnose, they will call it as allergy, or they will give some special peculiar word and finish it up there because they do not know anything about it. So some very complicated words will be in Greek or Latin or in Hebrew will be coined there and given the name of a disease. They can't understand everything. You go and tell the psychiatrist or the psychologist, you have these things. He will give some nearby disease, name of the disease, and make you a diseased man. Many times it will be something very high experience. That's why you have to see when people tell that they have visions, they have so many other things. See what is the kind of life he is leading. If he has a sound, base, moral life, very strong life, then all those visions are true. Or else, if he is leading a immoral life, or else all those way, whatever he is telling does not coordinate with his word, truthfulness, morality, then make sure that those things are just hallucination of the mind. So, Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling us that since all these bhava, the samadhi, and higher experiences are making that strong person strong, more moral, is leading a very wonderful life. So that cannot be called as deterioration, but it has to be admitted the cause of all these is also something very strong, and therefore it cannot be called as diseases or dearrangements of the brain. It is through these visions, etc., the special spiritual experiences have always been gained. But a man cannot be fit to realize the eternal peace. Man cannot be fit to realize the eternal peace till he had reached the nirvikalpa state through the cessation of all mental modifications. That is the first verse in Patanjali Maharshi's Yoga Sutra, Yogaha Chitta Vritti Nirodha, the cessation of all the mental modification due to the entry of the worldly sense objects into our mind through all the five senses. So it creates so many mental modification which are called chitta vritti, the mind stuff. The mind will make so many modifications. There will be so many vrittis rising in our mind. Every millionth of a second, so many vrittis will be coming up. So cessation of all those mental modification, chitta vritti, is the goal of yoga. So what happens when that cessation of all mental modification, chitta vritti nirodha happens? So that is called samadhi. A man cannot be fit to realize the eternal peace till he has reached the nirvikalpa state through the cessation of all mental modifications. And the non-dual state of consciousness has become natural to him. As an example of this, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, when a thorn runs into the body, one has to take it out by means of another thorn. Thorn in the sense here, any sharp object. So if a sharp object like a thorn enters into your body, then how is it to be removed? It has to be removed by another sharp object like needle or another thorn. When a thorn runs into the body, one has to take it out by means of another thorn and then throw away both. Forgetting the divine Lord, man has to come into this abnormality, the world. The abnormalities of sights, tastes, etc., gradually get attenuated by those visions and experiences which ultimately lead man to the knowledge of non-duality. He then feels blessed by knowing the truth of the rishis. Rishi means seers, the great saints who have perfected their mind, concentrated their minds, mantra drashtaras, the giver of truths, the discoverers of truths, they are called rishis. So he then feels blessed by knowing the truth of the rishis' utterances. Taittiriya Upanishad, it is quoted from Taittiriya Upanishad. He is verily bliss itself. This is the process. All the doctrines, experiences, visions, etc., of the spiritual world, without exception, help man to go forward towards that goal. Swami Vivekananda often said that these visions, experiences, etc., indicated how far the aspirant has gone forward towards the goal. He called them the milestones on the way to progress. While going towards some destination, some place, traveling, on the way you'll be seeing so many milestones. It will be written that particular destination is so many 100 kilometers, 1000 kilometers. So visions are like that. It will be showing you how you are progressing and how nearer you are to the goal. So they are the visions, and these things are the milestones on the way to progress in spiritual life. Therefore, let not the reader think that when there is a little intensity of a particular spiritual mood, or when one experiences the vision of the forms of one or two deities through meditation, spiritual realization, he has reached its culmination. So when you have some visions, experiences, or one or two visions of the deities, don't think that you have reached the culmination. It's far, far away. So that is only a milestone. It is showing that you have progressed a little. So you should never stop there. That's why Sri Ramakrishna used to always tell, Egiye jao, go forward, never stop, go forward. You have to reach the miles to go before you sleep. Miles to travel, miles to go before you sleep. So you have to go forward a lot. So in that case, he will fall into a great error. Falling into this kind of error, in the religious world, aspirants miss the goal. They get bogged in a single idea or mood and are filled with hatred and animosity towards others. So if a man makes this error in cultivating devotion to God, he becomes fanatical. You can see why there is quarrel amongst the different sects of religion, or even different religions. Why do they quarrel? Because they get a little visions like this, and instead of going forward and getting the highest, they think that is the highest, and they think all the other people are lying, or they don't have any other goal, good goal. So whatever they have seen is the highest and the correct thing. Just like some of the people claim, the time shown by my watch is the most correct one. The rest of the watch are not showing perfect time. So they go on quarreling, telling that, no, your watch is wrong. My watch is the correct watch. So everyone thinks so, but none of the watches are true. So it's all superficial. It is all apparent. That's why until you get this Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the highest, you should not go to become so fanatical. You will be disturbing the whole world. So that's why Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling, getting one or two visions or experiences, you may start thinking that you have reached the highest goal. It's only milestone on the way to progress. Therefore, let not the reader think that when there is little intensity of a spiritual particular mood, or when one experiences the vision of the form of one or two deities through meditation, spiritual realization, he has reached its culmination. In that case, he will fall into a great error. And what is that error? Falling into this kind of error in the religious world, aspirants miss the goal. So they will have to wait again. They will go back. There will be a downward trend. So they will miss the goal. They get bogged. They get stuck up in a single idea or mood and are filled with hatred and animosity towards others. If a man makes this error in cultivating devotion to God, he becomes fanatical and bigoted. This defect forms a great thorn in the path of devotion. So when you are going only with the help of devotion, bhakti marga, this is the greatest obstacle. What is that? You become fanatical or bigoted. So this defect forms the great thorn in the path of devotion. It arises out of the mean, narrow mind. That's why Sri Ramakrishna used to always tell, Gnana Mishrita Bhakti. Your devotion should be colored, or it should be guided by knowledge of God. So if your devotion, bhakti, is not guided by knowledge of God, then you tend to become narrow and mean-minded, fanatical, bigoted. So when there is this background of knowledge, gnana, intellectual development, then what happens is you become broad. That's why it should be always going together with bhakti. There should be knowledge of God to gnana. So then there'll be no chance of you becoming a bigot or fanatical, because why should it? You could have ignored, oh, let him become bigoted or fanatical, but you'll be doing great harm to the world. That's why here Shardanandaji Maharaj is taking so much of care to explain that it should be guided by knowledge, devotion. Then this fanaticism, bigotry will not come, and it will not trouble you and also the world. This defect forms the great thorn, hurdle in the path of devotion. It arises out of mean, narrow mind. Again, taking such visions to be the whole of religion, many come to the wrong conclusion that anyone who has not had such experiences is not at all spiritual. Then they will go on claiming that I had that vision, I had this astral travel, I went here, there, I saw this God, that God. But in life, if you note their life, it will be very, very narrow life. No such things can be found out. So then they are comparing the other people and criticizing them and thinking that they're very low. They have not at all had any visions. So please do not get worried when they tell that they have so many visions, and you need not be worried about that or unduly into trouble thinking that, oh, they are having all the visions I don't have. No, moral life, meditating on God, removal of all these arishad varga, kama, krodha, mada, matsarya, lobha, the cupid, lust, removal of that, krodha, anger, removal of anger, mada, arrogancy, pride, removal of that, matsarya, hatred or jealousy, removal of that, lobha, greed, removal of that. So these are the real progress of spiritual life. So if you are becoming unselfish, then know for certain you are much, much more gone forward than a person who claims that he has so many visions, but he's not at all strong in these moral aspects. So that's why Shardanandaji Maharaj is giving us a caution to be on the right path. Don't get misjudged or misguided, and don't be unduly worried that those people are having so many beautiful visions and astral travels, that and this, but we are not having. Even if you didn't have even a single vision, but if you are morally strong, if you have given up all these 6 enemies, you have become unselfish, you have started seeing God in all the living beings, then you are at a much great advantage. You have gone forward in spiritual life. So spirituality and aimless miracle mongering. So now you should be very, very careful. Shardanandaji Maharaj is coming to a very, very important aspect of spiritual life. Miracle mongering. We want that somebody should produce some ash in the hand, some golden ring, do like this and give something, or the diseases should be cured, or something should happen. So think that is the miracle. No, transformation, transforming people from their lower nature, animality, to the human nature, bringing them changes in life, karuna, compassion, all these things coming in them, becoming more broader. These are all the transformations, are all the miracles, greater miracles than these coming of vibhuti, coming of all other things. Okay, that's good. But what is that to you? What has happened? Has it changed your life? Has it increased the love of God? Has it made to go forward in spiritual life? That is very, very important. If those miracles can do that, well and good. Otherwise, aimless miracle mongering seem to the common mass, common people, to be the important thing of spiritual life. But this kind of hankering after miracles does not make man spiritual. On the contrary, it makes him weaker. If you have this miracle mongering, hankering after miracles, it does not make anybody spiritual. On the contrary, in an opposite way, on the contrary, it makes him weaker. if you are miracle mongering, if you are always after that hankering for miracles, then it will make you weaker daily in all respects. That which does not lead to steadfastness and strength of character. See, the important aspect of spiritual life, that which does not lead to steadfastness, strength of character, that which does not enable man to take his stand on the rock of purity. So purity is very, very important, purity of mind. So rock of purity and truth in defiance of the whole world, or that which entangles him more and more in various kinds of desires, instead of setting him free from them, is outside the realm of spirituality. So what are inside the realm of spirituality? It should lead us to steadfastness in life. So if you doesn't have this steadfastness, so it should lead us to strength of character. You should become strong in character, and you should base your life on the rock of purity. You should become more and more pure in nature. And also you should build your life on truthfulness. Whether the whole world stands against you, just like Satya Harishchandra, even then you will not give up purity, truth, and this character, your character steadfastness. So that is more important in spiritual life. So we should not entangle more and more in various kinds of desires. That is spiritual life. So otherwise you are outside the realm of spiritual life. So many people have some fantasies in their mind that spiritual life or some great saints should be like this, like this. So all that fantasies in our mind will crumble one by one. So what is the real thing of basis or the rock solid foundation of spiritual life is purity of character, unselfishness, steadfastness, then truthfulness. All these things are very, very important. So please note it in a deep way. What is real spiritual life? Otherwise, we are all outside the realm of spirituality. If extraordinary visions have not produced such results in your life, and nevertheless you are having those visions, know that you are still outside the realm of spirituality, and that the visions are due to a diseased brain and so are of no value. If, on the other hand, instead of having wonderful visions, you may not be having even one single visions or experiences, you find yourself acquiring strength of mind, strength of purity, strength of character, know for certain that you are on the right path, and that you will have these visions and experiences at the proper time. Do not worry for those extraneous visions and astral travels and miracles. Important thing is character of mind, purity of your mind, unselfishness. The more you are growing unselfish, do you feel for others? Do you feel compassion in your heart? Do you feel that you have to serve all the living beings? Then in reality, you are moving forward in spiritual life. Finding that some of the devotees of Sri Ramakrishna were experiencing ecstasy while he, though he had been visiting the master for a long time, had had no such experiences, a friend of ours, Gopal Chandra Ghosh, so a friend of ours, felt much perturbed and going to Sri Ramakrishna with tears, laid bare to him the distress of his heart. Hearing it, Sri Ramakrishna consoled him and said, "Don't be silly, my child. Do you think everything is gained when that is attained? Just having some experiences, palpitation, and other things, do you think you have attained spirituality simply because of having some visions? No. Don't be silly, my child. Do you think everything is gained when that is attained? Is it something very big? No, for certain, the true faith and renunciation are far more greater." So, here the words of Sri Ramakrishna. Don't be silly, my child. Do you think everything is gained by having some visions and other miracles? Is it something very big? Know for certain that true faith and renunciation, know for certain if you have true faith, and what is the other thing which is important? Renunciation are far greater virtues. Then Sri Ramakrishna is telling giving the example of Narendra. Why? Narendra. So Ramakrishna used to pronounce the name of Narendra as Narendar. So many such specialities were there. Sri Ramakrishna used to pronounce the name of Narendra as Narendar. So if you go to Punjab, so there all the things are pronounced in that way. If you call Indra, the Sanskrit word, there they will tell Indar. Then if it is Gurumindar, Gurumendra, Indra, it becomes Gurumindar. So everything they make Indar. So here Sri Ramakrishna, though from this northeast portion of India, that is not unique there, or that is not in practice, but still some specialities were there in the pronunciation of Sri Ramakrishna. So he was calling Narendra as Narendar. So he's telling why Narendra Swami Vivekananda does not generally have these visions, but just see how great is his renunciation. Comparing, Narendra is telling, Narendra doesn't have any visions or bhava like that, but see his renunciation, see his character. He's much more advanced in spiritual life than all the people who are sitting here having so many visions. So that's visions and other things, miracles are not so important. Renunciation is very important. Character of mind, purity, unselfishness, that is very, very important. So Ramakrishna is telling why Narendra, that is Swami Vivekananda, does not generally have these visions and other things, but just see how great is his renunciation. So now the importance of renunciation is stressed by Sri Ramakrishna, that is more greater. How great is his faith? That is more greater. Faith in the words of the Guru, faith in the words of the scriptures. So what is meant by faith? Just do you think it is static? No, it is dynamic. You take the words of the Guru, instructions of the Guru, and start practicing that intensely. That is faith. So see how great is his faith, his strength of mind, his concentration of the mind, strength of the mind, and his steadfastness. So these are more important in spiritual life. What is that? Faith, strength of mind, and steadfastness. Never give up, whatever may be the condition, whatever may be the adverse condition, difficulties. You should never give up whatever practices you are doing. You have to do all the spiritual practices with steadfastness. So these are the real traits, strength of spiritual life. So visions and other things are secondary. They are only milestones. Do not give too much credence and importance to them. So you heard the words of Sri Ramakrishna himself. When competency for living in oneness with the Divine Lord arises in certain aspirants, through the elimination of desires helped by steadfastness, firm faith, and single-minded devotion, there comes up in them sometimes on account of past impression, such pure desires as I will do good to people, I will act for the happiness of the many. Under the influence of such desires, they cannot then remain wholly in the non-dual state. They come down just a little from that high plane of consciousness to the realm of the I and mine again. But that I-ness is something very, very great, higher than the ordinary ego. So here Shardanandaji Maharaj is explaining that, but that I-ness of their lives in constant, unbroken consciousness of an intimate relation with God, such as I am the servant of God, I am a child of God, or a part of Him, that I can no more devote itself, I can no more devote itself day and night to lust and gold, knowing that God is the quintessence of everything, that eye does not in any way hanker after enjoyment of the worldly objects such as sight, taste, etc. The worldly objects means sense organs. So yeah, the sight, taste, smell, touch, all those things. It is interested in them only to the extent they are conducive to the realization of spiritual life, God realization, the end, and no more than that. Those who were once in worldly bondage but have now attained perfection by means of sadhana, spiritual practices, and are living in the rest of their lives in some loving relationship with the Divine Lord are known as the liberated in life. They are called Jivan Mukta. What is meant by Jivan Mukta? Liberated even while they are living, not getting liberation, eternal freedom after death, after giving the body. Even living here, they are liberated, they are free, they have realized God. They are called Jivan Mukta. That state is there, liberated in life. So do not always think that after giving up the body or going up somewhere, you're getting heaven. No, you can create your life here with full freedom. Heaven can be always moving with you. Vaikuntha, Kailasa can be just with you. You can create it wherever you go. So that is Jivan Mukta Avastha, liberated in life. It is those who are endowed from their very birth with the consciousness of such special relationship with God and have never in their life fallen in bondage like ordinary men, that are termed in the scriptures as Adhikarika Purusha. Who are Adhikarika Purusha? Adhikara means those who have been given the command, the rights, the powers. So that is Adhikara. So Adhikarika Purushas are the pure people, even they have realized God in their last life itself. Now they are born only to do some good to the people, to good to the world. So they have been pure always, intense renunciation. So they have been given some special powers to do good to this world. They are called Adhikarika Purushas or Ishvara Kotis, ever free ones, and so on. Again, there are sadhakas, spiritual aspirants, who after attaining the non-dual state of consciousness, after realizing that highest Parabrahma, never come down from that state even for the purpose of doing good to humanity. They don't want to come to this world. So they never come down. That so much of attraction and joy of that God or Parabrahman is so intense that you don't care for others. You just go and merge in it. So such people never come down from the state even for the purpose of doing good to humanity. They are spoken as Jivakotis, ordinary beings like us, Jivakotis. And we have heard from the Master Sri Ramakrishna that most of the liberated ones belong to this category, Jivakotis. Even among the first category, namely the Ishvara Kotis or Adhikarika Purushas, who come down from the normal dual state, from the non-dual state of Samadhi, to do good to humanity, there is a difference in degrees. Not everybody is equal. Not all the knowledge they have gained is equal, because you get the knowledge to the extent you carry the vessel. What is the size of your vessel, volume of your vessel? That much of water or nectar or the knowledge can be carried. If you have a small vessel, then the knowledge you have gained is small. If you have a bigger vessel, then the knowledge gained is big. So how to gain more big vessel? So how can you have a very bigger vessel in your heart? The more you remove your ego, the more your vessel, the size, volume of the vessel will be big. That's why they tell Vidya Dadati Vinayam. The more and more knowledge you get, the more and more humble you become. The more and more humility, the more big the vessel. More the ego, small vessel, puny. More bigger the ego, no space for God's grace and knowledge, very little space. So even amongst the people who are having highest non-dual samadhi or the knowledge of God, Advaita Gnana, or the Parabrahma Gnana, Brahma Gnana, they also The capacity varies in degrees. They may not have the same knowledge. Just like why is Lord Ganesha called Vinayaka or Ganesha, Ganapati, Lord of the, or the head or the leader of the Gana? Is it just Bhutagana? The devils, ghosts, hobgoblins who go about with Shiva? No. There are in Kailasa the great people who have gained the knowledge of Brahman, God, in Vaikunta and all those places, heaven. They have so much of great knowledge of this Lord, their own self. But amongst them, Ganesha is the best, the topmost person knowledge. You could see he was ready to give up, sacrifice, renunciation, his own life for the sake of his mother, Matru Bhakti. Then he used to see in all the living beings, his father and mother, in all the female beings, not only human beings, all the female living beings. It may be microbes, it may be birds, everything he used to see his mother. And in all the male beings, he used to see his father Shiva. The whole world, everywhere, he saw only the Lord. So that knowledge is not ordinary, and he used to act Shraddha in that fashion. So the knowledge is highest in Ganesha. That's why he's called Ganapati. He's given the first place, the highest knowledge. Ganesha, Ganapati is not just is the leader of some hobgoblins and ghosts, but he is the leader, best, the topmost amongst the realized soul. So you can see corroborated here. Amongst the liberated souls to the Ishvara Kotis, their knowledge differs. So even amongst these Ishvara Kotis, even amongst the first category, that is namely the Ishvara Kotis, who come down from the non-dual state of Samadhi to do good to humanity, there is a difference in degree in their experiences of oneness with the cause of the universe. Some of them have merely seen the sea of consciousness from a distance. Some have gone near and touched it. And others have drunk but a few drops. Sri Ramakrishna said by way of illustration, Narada, the celestial seer, Rishi, Narada Maharshi saw that the sea from a distance and came back. Shukadeva, the son of Vyasa Maharshi, Shukadeva, touched it but thrice. And Lord Shiva, the spiritual teacher of the world, took 3 sips only and lay devoid of consciousness of the external world. Becoming one with the non-dual consciousness, even for a short time, is what is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So what is Nirvikalpa Samadhi? Now Sharadanandaji Maharaj is explaining becoming one with the non-dual consciousness. Ekam Advitiyam Brahma, one and only one, undivided Satchit Ananda, to become one with that. Becoming one with the non-dual consciousness even for a short time is what is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Just as there are differences in the experiences of the non-dual state, there are differences in the experiences of the devotional moods also, such as Shanta, Dasya, Sakhya, Vatsalya, etc. So just like in the knowledge of non-dual reality, there is consciousness, undivided consciousness. Your experiences will vary according to the capacity you have inside. You can develop that also. The more humility, the more ego is destroyed, that much of knowledge you go on getting. So in the similar fashion, there is degree there, various degrees in that knowledge. Likewise, Sharadanandaji Maharaj is telling the differences in the experiences of, there are differences in the experiences of devotional moods too, and that is called bhava, devotional moods. What are they? Shanta bhava, dasya bhava, sakhya bhava, vatsalya bhava, etc. There may be more than this. There may be something in between them, all these things, all belonging to the lower states of consciousness, leading the aspirants ultimately to the non-dual state. Some become blessed by fully experiencing any one of these states, while others have just a glimpse of it. The full experience of any of these devotional mode has been termed in the scriptures on yoga as Savikalpa Samadhi. So that non-dual state is called Nirvikalpa. No Vikalpa. Nirvikalpa means no subject-object relationship. But here Vikalpa means the subject-object relationship is still there, pertaining. So that's why it's called Savikalpa, with Vikalpa. So all these with all the modes, not the other than the higher non-dual state, highest, the lower things where you will have this relationship with God, that is called Savikalpa Samadhi. When you have the union with God with these modes, they're called Savikalpa Samadhi. So all belonging to the lower state of consciousness, leading the aspirants ultimately. After that, that Savikalpa Samadhi will lead you to Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Some become blessed by fully experiencing any one of the modes, these states, while others have a just glimpse of it. The full experience of any of these devotional modes. There are so many devotional modes, 5 have been categorized. So even if you take up one and get the highest, go to the acme or the zenith of it, the full experience of any one of the devotional mode has been termed in the scripture on yoga as Savikalpa Samadhi. Then wonderful bodily changes, spiritual visions, etc. in these modes or in these bhavas or in this Savikalpa Samadhi, while going to that process, you will have wonderful bodily changes, you will have wonderful spiritual visions, experiences, etc. come on the aspirants in all spiritual states of consciousness. Now you have come to know what are these modes, what are these experiences, what is vision. So wonderful bodily changes, spiritual visions, etc. come upon the aspirant in all the spiritual states of consciousness, in the higher non-dual state as well as in the lower Savikalpa state. So you should remember these Nirvikalpa and Savikalpa. Nirvikalpa means no I, no difference of the subject object. The relation of subject object is completely eliminated. Only subject remains, no object. That is Nirvikalpa, no Vikalpa at all. Savikalpa means the subject object relationship is still there, ego is there. So going through that path is Savikalpa. So Savikalpa states, again, these visions and transformations are seen to be different in different individuals. So these visions, the transformations are seen to be different in different individuals. These changes are observed in some people after only superficial experiences, while very little of this is observed in others even when they have profound experiences. When their mind is very strong, in some aspirants, even when you have gone to the depth of the spiritual life, you may not have any external experiences. So these changes are observed in some people after only superficial experiences in some people, while very little of this is observed in others who, when they have profound experiences too. In illustrating this, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, now, if a couple of elephants get into the water of a small pond, the water in the pond is thrown out into violent agitation and it overflows. If it is a small pond and some elephants have entered it, but the water in the vast lake remains as still as ever when scores of them, that is big elephants, get into that water. Nor is it a fact that mere bodily changes and visions, etc., are inevitable signs of the depth of ecstasy. So do not worry that if you don't have spiritual experiences or any other visions, don't think that you are not moving in spiritual life. That is not an indication, that's only a milestone. But if you have more stronger renunciation, if you have steadfastness in spiritual life, if you are sticking on to the truth, moral life, and strength of character, then you are more forward in spiritual life. So nor is it a fact that merely bodily changes, visions, etc. are inevitable signs of depths of ecstasy. If, however, the depth of spiritual experience is to be measured, it must be done, as said before. How is it to be done? From observing one's steadfastness, nishtha, renunciation, vairagya, strength of character. How fast are you holding on to the truths? Strength of character, the attenuation of desires for enjoyment, for luxuries, etc. It is by means of this touchstone alone. It is by means of this touchstone alone. These tests, the litmus test, whether you are having all these things, that you can find out you are moving forward in spiritual life, or you are steadfast, or you are strong in spiritual life. So it is by means of this touchstone alone and by no other means that the amount of dross in ecstasy can be assessed. One thing therefore is very clear, namely the complete picture of the fully developed stage of one or another of the moods of Shanta, Dasya, Sakhya, Vatsalya and Madhura Bhava moods can be seen only in those persons who have realized their nature to be pure, awakened and free, by giving up all kinds of desires, and not in those who are entangled in the pursuit of lust and gold, kama and kanchana. One blinded by desires feels the attraction of desires only. How can such a one feel the sentiment towards God, which could be experienced only by minds free from the slightest tinge of desires? Now, we have tried to explain the nature of ecstasy as we have heard it from Sri Ramakrishna. Sharadananda Maharaj is telling that he is trying to explain the nature of ecstasy, all these different kinds of samadhis or moods or spiritual moods, as we have heard it from Sri Ramakrishna's holy mouth. It is necessary to say here a few words more in this connection, so that the reader may understand it clearly. From what we have said about the differences amongst the aspirants in their capacity to experience the moods of Shanta, Dasya, Vatsalya, Sakhya, etc., and of non-duality, is not to be inferred that even the incarnations of the God remained confined within any limits in the matter of experiencing these moods. They can at will manifest fully in themselves any of these devotional moods. Again, they can, by adopting the one non-dual mood, proceed in the experience of oneness with God. To an extent which is not in the power of any mortals, Jivan Muktas, the ever free or Ishvara Kotis. For having once produced far in the experience of their oneness with bliss itself, ordinary mortals like us, ordinary people, I may not categorize ordinary, you may be, some great souls may be there in you. So I do not know. I'm just telling about myself. I'm an ordinary person. So here, for having one proceeded far in the experience of their oneness with bliss itself, ordinary mortals cannot come down again to the realm of I and mind by separating themselves from the bliss. This is possible in the case of the incarnations of God alone, and it is by recording of their wonderful experiences that the scriptures like the Vedas, Puranas, and all other things and the Bible have come into being. Is it then strange that the spiritual experiences of incarnations should go beyond those recorded in the Vedas and the scriptures? Sri Ramakrishna used to say, in corroboration of this point, the state of this place, that is, the experiences which have come in Sri Ramakrishna, in the personality of Sri Ramakrishna, that the state of this place, meaning his own experiences, has gone beyond, much beyond what is written in the Vedas and the Vedanta. It is because Sri Ramakrishna was the foremost amongst them that he could return to the realm of I and mine for the good of the many and for teaching the people, even after remaining absorbed in the non-dual state of consciousness continuously for 6 months. That is a wonderful story. That is a wonderful story. It will not be out of place to say a few words about it here. I'm hearing some noise which is disturbing me, some tap noise, some commode noise is continuously disturbing me. Will you please put off mic, please? Yeah, thank you. Now we are going to speak about the higher experience, the samadhi, deep samadhi of Sri Ramakrishna, where he stayed for 6 months. On the third day of his initiation, that is Sri Ramakrishna's initiation into sannyasa by Totapuri, Sri Ramakrishna attained the ultimate realization of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, or complete oneness with God, spoken of in the Vedanta. By that time, Sri Ramakrishna had finished the disciplines according to the Tantras, all the other things, all the other spiritual practices. Sri Ramakrishna had already finished off. By that time, Sri Ramakrishna had finished the discipline according to the Tantras, and the learned Bhairavi Brahmani, the master spoke of her as Bamni, who had collected necessary articles for these sadhanas and taught their application, was living in Dakshineshwar. We have heard from Sri Ramakrishna that Bhairavi Brahmani forbade him to mix with Totapuri and said, "My child, do not mix with him, so much with him. These people lack devotion. Your love and affection for God will then vanish." But Sri Ramakrishna did not pay heed to her advice and used to be absorbed night and day in discussion of Vedanta and its realization. Totapuri stayed at Dakshineshwar for 11 months and left. Sri Ramakrishna then decided to dwell in the unbroken experience of oneness with God, or the state of non duality, instead of remaining in the realm of I and mine. So Sri Ramakrishna decided to merge in the unbroken experience of oneness, that is Parabrahma Swarupa consciousness with God, or state of non duality, instead of remaining in this realm of I and mine. His decision was immediately followed by the actualization of it. So, removal of this I and mine. There will be no I and mine. So, that is Nirvikalpa. So, now when Sri Ramakrishna decided, his decision was immediately followed by actualization of it. This episode of his life is indeed a wonderful story. Sri Ramakrishna was then not at all conscious that he had a body. Even ideas necessary for maintaining this body, everyday activities, like those of eating, sleeping, answering the calls of nature, etc., did not cross his mind at this period. There is no consciousness of the body itself. Then where is the question of keeping that body with all these things? Not to speak of then of desires like talking with others. No such idea as I and mine, you and yours, have any evidence in that state. The idea of two or of one also does not exist there. Now you can see Shardanandaji Maharaj explaining about Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Very, very difficult to explain it and even to understand it. But Shardanandaji Maharaj himself has experienced all this state. So he's trying to put it into the form of word. We are lucky that we are hearing that. So, what is happening in Nirvikalpa Samadhi? Shardanandaji is explaining which is happening to Ramakrishna at that time. Even ideas necessary for maintaining the body, like those of eating, sleeping, answering the calls of nature, etc., did not cross Sri Ramakrishna's mind not to speak then of desires like talking with others. No such ideas as I and mine, you and yours have any existence in that state. The idea of two or of one also does not exist there, and as of one can be experienced only when there is the memory of the two. In that state, all the functions of the mind, without a single exception, are completely stilled. A perfect calm prevails. There exists only an indescribable something of the nature of eternal consciousness and bliss, incomparable, transcending all limitations, eternally free. It is nameless, limitless, like ether, without parts, devoid of all ideas, an infinite immensity, untouched by cause or effect, a mood beyond all moods, a mood beyond all moods, which a man of self knowledge is conscious of in his heart during the profound concentration of mind called samadhi. Now, what is happening in the mind of the person who is in deep samadhi has been explained here. You have heard it. You can go through that again. It's a wonderful experience. So, bliss and bliss alone. Anandam sada shuddhu anandam. Bliss and bliss alone. It is no direction, no space, no object, no form, no name. There abides alone the bodiless self of the nature peculiar to itself, indescribable and blissful. It abides as a mood beyond all moods and ideas which exist only within the domain of the mind and the intellect, a state beyond all states, which the scriptures speak of as a sport of the self with the self. The scriptures speaks about this as the sport of the self of the self. The master was always experiencing such an indescribable state without any break. The master said that no worldly object or relation, Sri Ramakrishna used to say that no worldly object or relation acted as an obstacle in the path leading to his experience of Nirvikalpa Samadhi according to the Vedanta. For he had verily renounced for her sake, that is Mother Divine Mother Kali, all kinds of desires from his mind. While offering everything to the mother, he had said, Mother, here is thy knowledge. O mother, here is thy ignorance. Here is thy good and here is thy evil. Here is thy vice and here is thy virtues. Here is thy fame and here is thy calumny. Grant me pure devotion, my dear mother. Grant me pure devotion to thy lotus feet and show thyself to me. Thus had he renounced all kinds of desires and dualities for enjoyment out of pure love for her and in order to have a direct vision of her holy feet. Can we ever dream even of doing this to a small extent? He's asking all of us. Shardananda Maharaj is asking, can we dream even of doing this to a small extent? Leave aside having a direct feeling of that divine love for love's sake. Even if we ever practice resignation to the Lord, resignation means Sharanagati, surrender, that's called resignation. Even if we ever practice resignation to the Lord, saying, Here, O Lord, are all my belongings, they are verily thine. Still, when we feel their need for ourselves afterwards, we oust the Lord from their position and calculate our own profit and loss out of our so-called act of resignation. This is the state of our calculative mind. When We do anything we think of what people will say about it. We get agitated in many ways and restlessly run after many things. Thinking of the future, we alternate between the abyss of pain and heights of pleasure. We have this deep rooted egoism in us, making us feel that even if we cannot upset the whole world for the fulfillment of a selfish purpose, we can at least give it a sufficient turn towards that end. But Sri Ramakrishna was not a cheat. But Sri Ramakrishna's was not a cheat's mind like ours. So the moment he made a total offering of everything to the Divine Mother, saying, O Mother, here, O Mother, is whatever thou hast given to me, he could never any more cast a covetous glance at them. Never did he have such subtle regret as, alas, I have given my word, what can I do now? It would have been better not to have done so. That is why Sri Ramakrishna could never claim anything as mine if he had once made an offering of it to the Divine Mother. We would like to say another thing in this connection. Sri Ramakrishna could not say the Divine Mother one thing. He offered everything, all the dualities. But he could never offer this thing at the feet of the Mother. Note this point, it's very, very important. You have to understand the depth of this statement of Sri Ramakrishna. What is that? We would like to say another thing in this connection, that Sri Ramakrishna could not say to the Divine Mother, here is thy truth, O Divine Mother, here is thy truth, here is thy truthfulness, and here is thy untruthfulness, O Mother. Though he made to her an offering of everything belonging to his mind and body, merit and demerit, vice and virtue, good and evil, fame and calumny, and the like, but he couldn't give up truthfulness and untruthfulness. He couldn't offer. Why? Once the Master himself told us the reason of it. If I give up truthfulness in this way, said Sri Ramakrishna, how can I keep the truth that I have offered everything to the Mother of the Universe? Could you guess the depth of the statement? Here, note it, go deeper, understand this. Sri Ramakrishna himself is explaining. Once Sri Ramakrishna himself told us the reason of that he couldn't offer the truthfulness to Mother, because if I give up truthfulness in this way, said Sri Ramakrishna, how can I keep the truth that I have offered everything to the Mother of the Universe? And what a great devotion to truth did we witness in Master. What a great devotion to truth did we witness in Sri Ramakrishna, who had surrendered everything else to Sri Mother, Divine Mother. If he once said he would go to a place, he was there without fail at the proper time. If he once said he would not accept a thing from a certain person, he could not take it from anyone else. When he happened to say that he would not eat a certain thing or do a certain action, he could not from that day on eat it or do it. One who has devotion to truthfulness, said Sri Ramakrishna. Not the words of Sri Ramakrishna. One who has devotion to truthfulness, said Master, realizes the God of truth. One who has devotion to truthfulness, said Sri Ramakrishna, realizes the God of truth. Mother prevents his words from turning untrue. Divine Mother, if somebody is holding on to this truthfulness, Divine Mother prevents his words from turning untrue. There is a story I have heard. There was one great devotee of Divine Mother. While by mistake he was so greatly devoted to truthfulness and Divine Mother, by mistake he told that today is Purnima. So it was Amavasya. It was new moon day that day, but he told by mistake it was Purnima. Now the enemies of that great devotee told the king, complained, see, he has told like this, you have to ask him to prove it. Otherwise punish him. So he was put on fire if he doesn't prove that today is full moon day, because it is Amavasya, no moon day, new moon day. So how could he bring the moon? But that truthful man, the devotee of Divine Mother, prayed to Divine Mother, sang her praises. When he was about to be put into the fire, then suddenly the moon appeared. So the Divine Mother would never allow, if you are holding on to the truth firmly, you are a man of truth and the great devotee, the Divine Mother will not allow anything untruthful to come to in your mouth. Suppose if something comes, then she will make it true. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna is telling. One who has devotion to truthfulness, said Sri Ramakrishna, realizes the God of truth. Mother, Divine Mother, prevents his words from turning untrue. Ah, how many illustrations of this point have we not seen in Sri Ramakrishna's life? We would mention a few here. So before mentioning those points, I just wanted to bring you a small incident whereby we can understand that what Sri Ramakrishna is telling about truthfulness. Ramakrishna would give up all the dualities. Oh mother, take the vice, your vice and virtues. Oh mother, take this, all that is good, all that is bad. Oh mother, take everything. But he could never offer truthfulness at the feet of the mother. So the words of Sri Ramakrishna is, suppose I give away truthfulness to mother, then whatever I have promised that I have given up until now will be untruthful then. So I could never offer truthfulness to mother. So just to prove that, I just want to tell you an incident, a very humorous incident. There was one person, he was in search for a boy or a boy or a man to his daughter to give in marriage, to search for the bridegroom. So now it so happened he used to go to so many places, ask them questions and find out whether he's a suitable groom or not. So once he came to a man whom he thought he was suitable and started asking question to that would be son-in-law. So he told, what are the great qualities you have and what are the bad qualities that you have? He told, I have many great qualities. The would-be son-in-law was explaining how many great qualities he has. Started telling, I can do that, I can do this, I'm so great, I have these many great qualities. I can drive any vehicle, I can even drive a train, I can also drive aeroplane. So I can do so many things. Whatever you want, how many different qualities I have. I can swim the seas, I can swim in the ocean, I can wrestle, I can do martial arts, so many things, so many qualities. It would have many good qualities. Okay, after all those great qualities of his were mentioned, then the would-be father-in-law asked him, what are the negative things or the bad things you have? He told, I have only one bad thing. Only one. Is it? You have so many good things, like you can drive the train, you can drive the airplane, you can swim, you can wrestle, you can do kung fu, karate, do anything. So many good qualities. You have so many master degrees, you have so many PhDs, all those things. Wonderful. And you are telling that you have only one bad character. What is that? Then he told, I always tell lies. That is the only bad character. I always tell lies. That's all. That is the only bad character. So what is the meaning of that? If he's always telling lie means whatever he told now, all the good qualities of his, so many good qualities that he can drive the train, he can drive the aeroplane, he can drive all the vehicles. So it is only driving train only. In India, the word used for telling lie is driving the train, means that he's telling all sort of lies. So this one quality, always telling the lie, can prove that whatever you told, all these things, all the good qualities and so many other things are all a lie, isn't it? So likewise here, Sri Ramakrishna couldn't give up truthfulness. Oh mother, here is your truthfulness, I offer it to you. No. All other dualities he gave up, vice and virtue, good and bad, calumny, name and fame, everything. He offered all the dualities at the feet of the mother. Oh mother, take it back. Take all these things at your feet. I offer it. But he could never, Sri Ramakrishna is telling, I could never give up truthfulness. Why? If I give up truthfulness, then whatever I have told, all these things offered to Divine Mother will all become false. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna is telling, I could never give up truthfulness. You can see by these words what is the intensity of the words of Sri Ramakrishna. He means everything. There is no cheating in the inner chambers of the heart. There is no difference in deed and thought and words. They're all one and the same. That is true truthfulness. So you can understand the intensity of his truthfulness. So we'll go forward to see many other great traits which we can adopt, because why do we study all these great things of Sri Ramakrishna? Not just to hear with this ear and give it up here, but to at least practice a little. Yes, we may not be having the capacity to practice in toto or in its intensity. At least we can start with the first step, a little, an ounce. That's why Swami Vivekananda's statement, an ounce of practice is greater than tons of theories. An ounce of practice is greater than tons of theories. You may read, you may quote tons and tons of theories, but it is better to practice a little. An ounce of theory is better than tons and tons of theories. So at least when we hear all these things, the intensity of all the qualities, the great nature of Sri Ramakrishna, why should we hear it? After hearing, should we try a little to inculcate them into our life? Little, not much. We cannot maybe to that fuller extent, but at least a little. So we shall see all other great things of Sri Ramakrishna so that we can slowly absorb it. So that thing which Sri Ramakrishna has told, one who has devotion to truthfulness, said Sri Ramakrishna, realizes the God of truth. There is also one more statement of Sri Ramakrishna. One who is always holding on to truthfulness will be always sitting on the lap of Divine Mother. One who is holding on to truth always is always sitting on the lap of Divine Mother. These are the statement of Sri Ramakrishna. Here, Sri Ramakrishna is telling one who has devotion to truthfulness, said Sri Ramakrishna, realizes the God of truth. Mother prevents his words from turning untrue. How many illustration of this point we have not seen in the Master's life? We would mention a few here. One day it was arranged at Dakshineshwar that the great devotee Gopala's mother, Gopalirma, should cook rice for Sri Ramakrishna and feed him. Everything was ready. The master sat down to take his food. He found the rice hard, not properly boiled. The master was annoyed and said, "Can I eat this rice? I shall not take rice out of her hands anymore." When these words came out of Sri Ramakrishna's mouth, everyone thought that Sri Ramakrishna had only warned Gopala's mother in order to make her careful in future. It was impossible to imagine that he would not take rice anymore in future, any more rice out of her hand. Seeing that he had so much love and respect for Gopalerma, who had realized Krishna as her son, always Lord Krishna as baby Gopala, as a baby, as a small child would be moving around, running, sitting on the shoulder of Gopalerma. So Sri Ramakrishna had lot of respect towards her, love and affection towards her. He would perhaps forgive her a little later, and there the matter would end. But the contrary happened, for Sri Ramakrishna had shortly afterwards a disease in his throat. It became gradually so acute that he could not take rice anymore. In this way, circumstances conspired to make that casual remark of Sri Ramakrishna to come true in its profundity. One day, while he was in a spiritual mood, Sri Ramakrishna said at Dakshineshwar, "I shall not eat anything except porridge henceforward." The Holy Mother was bringing his food to him at that time. Hearing this and knowing that any word coming out of Sri Ramakrishna's mouth never proved untrue, she felt nervous and said, "Why, I shall cook for you rice and soup. Why porridge then?" "No porridge," were the words uttered by him. "No porridge," were the words uttered by him in that spiritual mood. Soon after, he got the throat disease, and it turned out that none of the preparations that are generally taken with rice could be taken by him. He lived on just porridge, milk and barley and the like. The master specified the well-known Shambhucharan Malik of Calcutta, who was generous and wealthy, as the second or of the four suppliers Rasaddar of provisions. He had a garden near the Kali temple of Rani Rasamani. There he used to spend much time with Sri Ramakrishna in discussing spiritual matters. There was in that garden his charitable dispensary. Sri Ramakrishna suffered often from stomach troubles. Coming to know of this one day, Shambhu advised him to use a small dose of opium every day and asked him to take it from him before he returned to Rasamani's garden. The master also agreed. Afterwards, engaged in conversation, both of them forgot about it. He bade goodbye to Shambhu and came to the road. When he remembered about his agreeing to take the opium from him, he came back to take it, but found that Shambhu had gone into the inner apartment. Instead of calling him, Sri Ramakrishna asked his manager for it, and having got a little, was returning to Rasamani's garden. But as soon as he came to the road, he felt a sort of reeling and could not see the road. His legs were drawn as it were towards the drain by the road. He said to himself, "What is this? This is by no means the road." At the same time, he could not find out the cause. As a last resort, he thought that there might be a mistake as to the direction, and turning towards Shambhu's garden, he went that road leading that way was distinctly visible. He thought a little and came back to Shambhu's gate, and ascertaining the road again back to the Dakshineshwar. Well, from there again proceeded with care towards Rani Rasamani's garden. But no sooner did he advance a couple of steps than he found himself in the same plight. He could not see the road. His legs were being drawn in the opposite direction. When it happened thus a few times, it struck him that Shambhu had asked him to take the opium from him But instead of doing that, he had taken it from his manager, and that too without Shambhu's knowledge, which amounts to stealing. That was why Sri Ram, the mother, Divine Mother, had been preventing him from going. The manager should not have given it without Shambhu's orders, and he too should have taken it from Shambhu himself, as he had promised to do so. Hence, as it was, two wrongs, theft and lying, were being committed by him. That was why Divine Mother was preventing him from returning. Thinking thus, he came to Shambhu's dispensary and found that the manager also had gone. Therefore, he threw the packet of that medicine through the window and said in a loud voice, "Hello, here is your opium." Saying so, he started towards Rani Rasamani's garden. Lo, this time he did not have the railing, and the road was clearly seen, and he reached the garden without difficulty. "Have I not," said Sri Ramakrishna, "completely taken refuge in Divine Mother? That is why Divine Mother has taken hold of my hand. She prevents me from taking a single wrong step. She prevents me from taking even a single wrong step. Have I not taken complete refuge at the feet of Divine Mother? So Divine Mother prevents me even from taking a single wrong step." So you can find so many other examples, but now for today, we will start this discussion, and now we will dedicate our time for question and answer session. If you have any questions, if you have any doubt, you can ask now. Any questions, any doubt on the matter discussed today, you can ask. Okay, if you don't have any questions, then I can proceed to utter the prayer, closing prayer.
Om Swamiji. Colin Chetty, Swamiji.
Colin Chetty, please tell.
Swamiji, the items that you discussed today are quite complex.
Yeah.
Everybody is still drugged, not with opium, but with the sugar of all the things that we've eaten. But nonetheless, very enlightening subject, Swamiji. It needs a lot more thought before we can ask them. Before I can ask questions anyway, Swamiji.
Definitely.
Thanks, Swamiji.
Thank you, Colin. Any other doubts or question? Okay. Om Priyatam Pundarikakshah Sarvayagneswaro Harihi Tasmin Tushte Jagat Tushtam Prenite Prenitam Jagat Harihi Om Tatsat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.